Good evening. My name is Mrinal Verma, and I'm Provost and Senior Vice Chancellor at AUM. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and welcome to Author Talks and the book launch of Behind the Uniform, Not Just a Cop. Shubhangi Singh is a budding psychologist and author. After completing her first master's in psychology from Delhi University, she came to AUM to pursue her second master's in clinical psychology. She has been writing poetry since childhood and has won many awards. Her first book, a collection of Hindi poetry, covers topics ranging from everyday life events, emotions, and thoughts to mental health awareness, spirituality, and the purpose of life and self-exploration. She has authored numerous articles on issues related to mental health and has presented her research papers at national and international conferences. Behind the Uniform, Not Just a Cop is her second book, which she co-authored with her father, Mr. Rakesh Kumar Singh, a well-known writer who currently serves as the commanding officer of the Rapid Action Force of India, which is a specialized division of Central Reserve Police Force of India, the largest paramilitary force of the world. The book, Behind the Uniform, Not Just a Cop, examines challenges faced by cops all over the world while focusing on occupational stressors, including long work hours, irregular timings, and exposure to crime and trauma. Stress and mental health problems among police forces and other law enforcement officers have emerged as a worldwide phenomena affecting not only the service delivery and functionality of police officers, but also taking toll on their health and efficacy. Excessive stress affects the health of personnel and results in higher rates of mental health issues such as suicide, anxiety, depression, substance abuse, decreased job satisfaction, and burnout. The book also provides self-help tips for police officers and calls for a better understanding of the challenges that they face from administrators and policymakers. This evening, on the dais, Shubhangi is joined by a distinguished panel of professors and practitioners who will discuss the issues raised in the book and their relevance in the global context. Joining Shubhangi on the panel is Dr. Courtney Wade, Department Chair and Associate Professor in the Department of Criminal Justice at AUM's College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, Dr. Rolando Carroll, Associate Professor of Psychology at AUM's College of Sciences, and Chief Brenda Mitchell, Director of Police Operations at Auburn University at Montgomery Police Department. I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate Shubhangi and offer my thanks to the panel members, Ms. Brooke Nonenman, Dr. Santa Verma, Dean Philip Johnson, Mr. Tobias Menza, Ms. Marie Harrington, Ms. Pepper Martin, and Mr. Chris Reeves for helping us organize this event. I would now turn over the microphone to the panel. Let's give them a big round of applause.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. So I figure we'll just get started asking a few questions to our author here. So Shubhangi, how has your educational background in psychology impacted the intent, organization, and the content of this book that you co-authored with your father?
Sure. So I have my bachelor's and master's in psychology, and after that I want to do a specialization. That's why I come for clinical psychology. So I think my educational background was really helpful in understanding the concepts and how psychology teaches in terms of how to see the problem, how to look at it from multiple angles, how to include social aspect, and how what we are seeing and perceiving, it's not the actual truth. There are different angles of seeing it. So it basically helps us in how to go about understanding the concept, understanding the problem, and then moving towards the problem orientation. And it also helps in dividing the book. As we divided the books in different parts, so psychology plays a major role in how to go about dividing it. It helps us in first focusing on understanding the issues, then moving towards identifying the stressors, then moving towards self-help and action taken by organizational level or country level.
Thank you. So what was your inspiration for writing this book?
So my inspiration is experiential and expertise both. So from my own experience, my dad is in paramilitary and I have shifted across different schools since childhood. I have changed 12 schools, lived in different cities, and I've observed them very closely. And I've seen the role of lacking mental health expertise in the field. Like there is no one they could talk to. They will reach to their senior officers or they will talk amongst themselves in terms of how to go from the problem. But there is no body, like no mental health unit that will work on it and help them in terms of how to deal with the problem they face in their everyday life. So through that and through seeing those experiences, learning from them, and after coming into the field of psychology, it makes me and motivates me to write on this topic.
Thanks. That's a really good segue to our next question. I don't know if you want to add more, but what's your personal connection to the themes of this book?
I think the personal connection is my experience when I observe them and I see that something is lacking and it's portrayed in a very different way on social media and in news. So I want to give a different angle to it. I feel like everyone know the half part of it and they don't know their side. They just know their work and they just know them in uniform. You need to know person completely to make judgment about anything. So I just want to give the whole part of it.
Okay, Shubhangi, could you please tell us who you believe your ideal audience for this book is? Or perhaps a better way to say it is, who do you think would benefit most from reading the book?
Sure. So as we can see from the topic of the book, the target audience is definitely the law enforcement people who are working in this field because it's specifically handling their problem. But as we go for the mental health aspect of the book, I think it's applicable to people who are in high-risk job, who are in the job that leads to like burnout, exhaustion, fatigue, or I think it could help anybody who wants to know about mental health and how to like be an efficient worker, how to find job satisfaction and how to work properly. So it will like psychoeducate you about different concepts in psychology and give you tips to be more emotionally intelligent, more happy, and provide you with alternative ways of working on yourself. So yeah, I think it could be helpful for everyone.
So considering, this positive perspective, this positive approach, there are negative stereotypes and there's challenges that the police in the United States and India are facing. What are your thoughts on these challenges? And do you find these challenges perhaps to be universal, or are you seeing some differences now that you've been in the United States?
I think the core belief of these challenges are similar. Like as we can see, the core belief is out of fear or out of that these people have power or their intentions are wrong, they will harm us, or like we see just for their work, like we never think that, okay, they could be having a bad day or they could be scared out of something or they are stressful or they are working for long hours. We never want to see that aspect of police. We just want to see, okay, they are doing it on purpose, like they are trying to harm us or their intention is false. So I think that's the core belief that is universal. And I do believe like certain things are depend on context and situation in different countries. So that could differ in every country. Like in India, it's different in terms of why people protest and why people like have these issues. But I think the core beliefs are same all across the world.
Well, before we segue into asking Chief Mitchell some questions, I do have one last question for you. So taking a look at all that you have shared with us, what would be the key takeaway you hope readers would take with them after they have read the book?
So the key takeaway is to see the cop behind the uniform, to see them in all their aspects, to see them more than just their work, and see that the work is just a shade of their life. People have different shades in their life. They have different aspects. To see the complete picture and make judgment based on the complete picture, not the half information.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. All right, Chief Mitchell. So this first question that I have for you, I realize there's a lot you could tell us. So the challenge for you will be to perhaps figure out how best to parse down what it is you'd like to share with the audience. Share with us your experience of being a police officer.
Wow. So you said a mouthful because there's so much that I could say about being a police officer, because this is actually my 35th year in law enforcement. So
Here we go. Thank you. Do you have some challenges, some accomplishments you want to highlight? maybe even talk about what it's been like to be a female in a male-dominated job.
So first, let me say how I got into
Yes.
being a police officer. So, you know, when you're young and you're asked questions, when you're like in vacation Bible school or doing different things, and I was 12 years old when I was asked the question, what is it you want to be when you grow up? And so off of my lips came, I want to be a police officer. So I think I frightened myself because I don't know where that came from. I'm actually from a very large family. My parents had a total of 13 children. Currently, there's still 12 of us, and we're in all different professions, you know, and we're from a small town below poverty level, but all of us got an education and got degrees, and so our parents really instilled in us. So we didn't fight being from a large family. So that's not the reason why I got into the profession. But I always wanted to work with young people, and so in doing so, I learned after I grew up a little bit, went to college. My bachelor's degree was in criminal justice. And so I always wanted to work with young people and investigating crimes against or crimes that were committed by. So after graduating from college, I worked 3 years in the fast food, and then I went into law enforcement. And so I ended up working in an area where I investigated crimes that were committed by young people or that were victims of crimes. And so what got me into this, always wanting to help somebody. You know, everybody said they want to help someone. You don't actually have to go into law enforcement to do that. But I say that we're all set aside to do a certain thing, and all of us know what that certain thing is. So this is my niche. The older I get, I think the more I talk, so you might have to shut me up a little bit. But, you know, in this arena, it's not just a self-satisfaction for myself, but it's knowing that I'm doing a job that supports somebody else. So we're all in this world to do a certain thing. Everybody can't be a police. Everybody can't be a teacher. Everybody can't be a doctor. But I always say, whatever you're doing, be the best at it. So being in law enforcement and working in the local law enforcement arena for 24 years, and then emergency management agency as a director for 1 year before coming here, I got my master's degree right here at AUM. And so prior to doing that, I said, well, I'm going to work here one day, because I always wanted to work with young people, to be a guide and to be a support. I think that's where I am with that. So, of course, there have been some obstacles. When I first came into the profession and being a woman in law enforcement, so my first career with law enforcement was with the Montgomery Police Department. When I went into that arena, the female officers had a lawsuit because they were saying the promotions were unfair. I wasn't a part of that lawsuit because it was going on at the time that I got there. So after being there, of course, that lawsuit ended and the females won. So what that meant was, to be promoted, you had to test to be promoted. And so that, with that testing process, it was fair across the board. So I just couldn't see you and say, I want to promote you and not you. Because if that had happened, I may not have ever ended up where I ended up at. Doesn't mean I wouldn't have continued to try. In my 24 years with MPD, I left as the assistant chief and then became the director of the Emergency Management Agency. Through that process, I've had an opportunity, I've been blessed enough to work in so many areas and to be a positive light in those areas. I've commanded departments within the police department or divisions that some people say you're not qualified to do, but people will judge and say what you can't do, and sometimes you got to prove, hey, I don't owe you anything, it's the people that I owe it to, so I'm going to do the best that I can where I am. Training and recruiting for the city of Montgomery, and any agency that had new police officers came through under my ranks at the academy. I commanded the investigative division for the whole city of Montgomery. I commanded the patrol division for the city of Montgomery. So with that, there were some large tasks. And I always say it's not the title that make a person, it's not the uniform that make a person, but we do need to have respect for that, right? But, you know, we have to display ourselves with the job that we have to do and do it to the best of our abilities and be able to present in those positions to be able to do that. So although some of those challenges existed, I've never been a person to be told that I can't do something if that's something that I wanted to do. And so knowing that and not let people put labels is one of the reasons why I've been so successful. When I made the rank of major, before making the rank of assistant chief, there was a person in that area that spoke, she don't know enough to be able to be in that position because I made it through the ranks fast. Every 2 years I was testing and I was in the promotable band, so I was promoted and I was eligible and I deserved to be where I was. So not only did I know enough, but I knew enough to carry that person that made that statement. So it's not what people say about you. And being in this profession, a lot of times people are gonna say things, but when you know the job that you're supposed to do, it's not about what people say about you, it's about the job and your responsibility. So it's been a great ride. I've been asked the question of the difference between local law enforcement and working on a college campus or university. What's the difference in that? We deal with some of the same issues. They may be on a smaller scale, and some people say, well, you should be bored because you're on a college campus. You're never bored if you're doing the job. There's always something to do. So it's not a boring thing because we're in a position to lead our young people to be able to deal with law enforcement, not just here, but when you lead AUM campus. So that's one of my roles. That's one thing that I want to do to make sure that our connection with our students, our staff, and the fact that it's positive, but also know that we're here to do the job and we're going to do that as well. Okay? So I'm going to stop.
Yeah. It's fabulous, and your energy is positive and it's motivating, and our students are really lucky to have you. We're lucky to have you, and we can all learn from you. And in light of the positive message of Shubhangi and her dad's book, you know, it really dovetails nicely. But there's a lot of stress that comes with the job. And so I'm going to hand things over to my colleague here, and he's going to ask you some things about how you take care of yourself and how you decompress.
Yeah, 'cause there are multiple chapters in this book that deal with self-care, kind of dealing with or trying to prevent burnout. So we wanted to ask you, Chief, if you have any tips for aspiring officers or current officers or just people here, some strategies that you implement for decompressing, kind of dealing with your stress.
Well, one thing, just know you're not in it alone. You know, a lot of time, and it's just not law enforcement, but any arena you're in, sometimes we take things so personal, but we have to realize that it's not about us. And the job, you know, and you see different things, how do you deal with that? You know, and working in the juvenile division and seeing things happen to children that a lot of people couldn't see and go to sleep at night. And so in seeing that, I know the question does arise, how can you go home and go to sleep and wake up and go back and do it again? But it's having that support group. Everyone has to have some form of support. If not, you will turn to things that will harm your health, that will harm your relationships. And having a support group that you can actually communicate, and some people say, well, that should be your family. Sometimes it can be, but it's not all the time that you can go home and speak with your spouse, and definitely you might not want to tell your parents because they would probably tell you to get out of the profession, right? So you wouldn't want to go home and tell your spouse because it may anger them or they may not understand, and then there are some issues. And with law enforcement, sometimes they don't want to go to counseling because there's a stigma behind that. But you have to be able to talk with someone. I have some type of hobbies that you enjoy. And when you get a chance to read the book, you're going to see some things, and the things that she's talked about in this book are some things that actually happen. But having relationships, being able to talk to people, having hobbies, because a lot of officers may turn to drinking, they may turn to smoking, doing illegal drugs, have domestic violence or dating violence relationships. So there are a lot of negative things that will happen if you don't have a support group or you don't have an outlet.
Thank you. And I think that's a good transition. Do you have any advice for current or aspiring officers in terms of maintaining a work-life balance? If maybe they feel that the job is interfering too much with, having something outside of the job.
So I think, and I have one of my young officers here, so I'm glad to see him here today. But, having a relationship and working in the local law enforcement where sometimes you're going into a profession. I know one time someone asked, "You going to take off your birthday?" In this profession, you can't take off your birthday. You got to go to work, right? So there may be some opportunities if there's open communication. And sometimes officers that are not in the ranks may be a little frightened sometimes to really speak up in a professional manner. We are communicators. Lieutenant is here, so we are communicators. We listen, we sympathize, but first thing we know, the job has to be done. But that doesn't mean we can't work with you to make sure you get some of the things that you need. There are long hours. Sometimes you have to be called in to pull an additional shift. This is not a profession where you can say, "Oh, I can't come in today, I'm tired." We're relying on you for life safety. And so this is not a job where you can do those type of things and just call out. It's a responsibility. But for lower officers, the officers coming into, it's got to be a profession that you really want to do and not look at and think, "Oh, it's the glory of it all," because that is not it. We're not in it to be recognized. We're in it to do a job to keep people safe. And if you're not coming into it for the right reasons, you're not going to be a success.
We appreciate that. Very insightful, and the vast experiences that you have. Just want to reiterate what Dr. Wade had said, but the AUM students are very lucky to have you as their chief, and we're lucky to have you. So we wanted to transition a bit, and I guess if we have two professors here, one of criminal justice and one of psychology, to share a bit of some of the relevant research that we found that relates to some of the topics that are mentioned in Shubhangi's book. And so I'm just going to give you some tidbits of research that we found relating to kind of self-care or things that we have found that seem to be effective in helping police officers deal with burnout, deal with stress management, deal with poor sleep quality, etc. So for instance, some of the chapters that Shubhangi had wrote about discuss mindfulness training or mindfulness practice and kind of implementing some yoga techniques. And for those of you unfamiliar with mindfulness, I think a simple way to conceptualize it is it's comprised of two parts. One of them is trying to be aware of the present moment, of your present thoughts, your present sensations, just kind of trying to be present. And the second aspect is being non-judgmental of whatever thoughts pop into your head, right? If you've sat with your thoughts long enough, you kind of realize that you aren't in control of the thoughts that just kind of pop in. They just kind of, enter uncontrollably. And so one of the practices of mindfulness is to accept them, be non-judgmental about them, and just kind of let them come in and let them go. And there's a lot of research showing that with mindfulness training, police officers specifically can benefit from things like this. So for instance, officers who were trained in mindfulness, and especially those who did really well with the aspect of being non-judgmental with their thoughts, those were found to have less work-related stress related to being a police officer. Also some physiological benefits, right? The job of being an officer can be very stressful. So those who are better at practicing mindfulness will notice some physiological benefits like lower heart rate variability. So just a lower resting heart rate, right? Reduced psychological strain, reduced general health complaints, better sleep quality, improved emotional affect, so they don't find themselves in a bad or grumpy mood all the time, so that's great. And they're more likely to continue practicing mindfulness at home on their own, and they're more likely to implement aspects of self-care. So they'll try a little bit harder to kind of take care of themselves and realize that, hey, I'm not feeling that great. Let me do something to kind of help myself feel better and improve my mood. Obviously, being a police officer, you can experience some unexpected events that could be potentially traumatic. So there's some correlation between being an officer and having the possibility of developing PTSD or having experienced a potentially traumatic event that could lead to some post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. And so some research on officers who suffer from PTSD and report poor sleep quality because of their PTSD symptoms. Those who practice mindfulness training regularly report better sleep quality and reduced PTSD symptoms, right? So again, trying to be in the present moment, aware of your current thoughts and sensations, and not being hard on yourself about the things you're thinking about, kind of accepting them non-judgmentally can be beneficial. And there's some really cool research on the toughness and the resilience of police officers, especially in the face of potentially traumatic events. So there was a large study conducted where they collected data from police officers, from civilians, and then from individuals in other occupations who had recently experienced a potentially traumatic event, either a natural disaster or a man-made disaster. And they wanted to see who of those individuals in those occupations are experiencing PTSD symptoms. And they found that in general, police officers have a much lower rate of experiencing PTSD symptoms, right? So everybody experiencing the same traumatic event, not being prepared for it, but the psychological resilience and kind of training and toughness that officers have, they're less likely to develop PTSD from those events. However, when you follow up with those officers over time, maybe 3 months after the event, 6 months after the event, you start to see symptoms of anxiety, depression, and potential PTSD creep up. So I think that kind of buttresses well or supports the idea that we do need mental health services. We need to kind of reduce the stigma of seeking mental help, right? Because it seems like they deal with the traumatic event well acutely, right when it happens, but as time progresses, it seems like it kind of breaks them down a little bit, and it's good to kind of provide these mental health services over time, so when 6 to 8 months later, when they need them, they're there and available to them. And then some stuff about emotional intelligence. So I think, right, we know about general intelligence or intellect, but I think a couple of things to keep in mind, or a good way to conceptualize emotional intelligence is, for instance, understanding your own emotions, being able to express your emotions clearly, understanding the emotions of others, being able to identify different emotions in others without them having to tell you. Those are some aspects of it. But there are some benefits to, or in tandem with mindfulness training, officers high in what we call EQ, or emotional intelligence, tend to have lower work-related anxiety, and they actually express more commitment and engagement to the profession, and they are less likely to be considering the idea of leaving the profession, right? So they have not necessarily a lower turnover rate, but they're less likely to think about turnover. They're like, all right, I can deal with this. I know my job's tough, but I know what I'm getting myself into. I kind of can make sense of how I'm feeling about the job, and it doesn't make me want to run away from the profession. I'm less likely to kind of entertain the thought of turnover. But yeah, that's just some of the psychological research I thought I would share that related to some of the topics covered by Shubhangi in her book.
And the nice thing is, as the criminologist who does not do policing research, I will fully admit that, what really dovetails well with what Dr. Carroll has covered with these topics, looking at it from a micro perspective, how officers individually handle their stresses. A lot of the literature I was able to consult and distill and kind of put together in a way that would kind of meld well with what we're talking about with the book. It fits nicely. And, looking at the organizations, the policing organizations, how are they handling officers having stress? And this research talks about, when it comes to the day-to-day stresses on the job, It tends to be, by and large, minimal for some officers. Some officers may have high levels of stress, but a work-life balance sometimes can have a moderate stress level for some officers, where you then see one's own perception of their quality of work life is a high level of stress for them. And so it doesn't necessarily matter that they're able to handle their day-to-day tasks without a lot of stress. The fact that the perception that they have of their overall work life being negative is providing a lot of stress for them. And so getting into some more of the research that's been published most recently, looking at kind of how different things can moderate the work-life balance could be bolstered by organizational support. So officers, whether we're looking at state troopers, whether we're looking at campus police officers, municipal police officers, or federal law enforcement officers, they need to be supported by the organizations that they work for. Is there any innovation out there in terms of training that's new, cutting edge, dealing with technology, ways to increase methods of coping with their stress? What are we looking at? And I was finding things related to emotional intelligence and resilience. And I went back to an old folder of mine on my computer. Once upon a time, I had a colleague at Kansas State that wanted to do some work with police stress. And I thought, this stuff is too old. It's too old. But there's got to be some really good stuff in here. So I decided to take a look and see what I could find. And one thing really stood out to me. And some of this was the work that he published. And I'd like to read this verbatim just because I thought it was quite telling. Much of the negativity surrounding the policing enterprise, from contemporary media portrayals to public attitudes to toxic masculinity, has been shown in the research to lead to officer burnout. So he was making it very clear that, yes, there's negativities that officers are dealing with day to day, whether it's day to day, whether it's just this general work perception of their work-life balance, or whether it is what they're having with their overall satisfaction with their career. But they're becoming burned out, and what is increasing their burnout at a greater rate is these negativities. And so I think when we look at the public, at times the public might think that the police aren't necessarily as affected by what we see that can cause stress or cause concern for our communities. But in fact, police officers and those working in law enforcement, our police professionals, are in fact stressed out and experiencing burnout. So I thought that was quite telling. It was a little nugget that I pulled from some of the dated literature. So now we want to segue into a conclusion of sorts. We want to turn it back to Shubhangi. Would you like to summarize for us again a few more key takeaways, just some things you want us to kind of walk out of here and remember about the book, especially as it pertains to self-care, what officers can do to take care of themselves?
So yeah, I will begin with summarizing the book, the model which the book is based on. So it is called UISA. So U means understanding. First few parts focuses on understanding what problems police face in terms of gender, in terms of how to manage their life and how to manage their work, in terms of stress. Second part goes into identifying. In this part, we focuses mainly on what are their stresses. We create a checklist on it that could help them to see which stresses they are dealing with. It's divided into your work stress, your personal stress, and what's your ability to maintain resilience in all aspects of your own personal skill and your environment that could impact you and that could create a stress. So second part focuses on identifying those skills and identifying different perspectives that could lead to stresses. Third part that you also mentioned about the self-work. In third part, I highlighted first going by psycho-educating them about what emotions are, what thoughts are, what feelings are. Then moving towards giving them some tips and techniques related to emotional intelligence, like how they can develop resilience, how they can change their everyday routine to balance between their family and between their work, how they could be able to better understand their emotions, how to label their emotions, how to name your emotion, to like understand and be in tune with your mental aspects, like how to understand emotion better, how to like change your thought that could impact your emotions and that could impact your behavior. So we drill into certain concepts of cognitive psychology and emotional intelligence to create these techniques that could be used by themselves. They don't need any experts to use them. They can do it and make change by their own self. And we also try to give holistic development approaches like yoga. You can work on your nutrition, you can add exercise, you can work on your sleep routine. So how certain other things apart from your self-help techniques could also help you in changing your mental aspects and changing your mental health. Then we also emphasize on that change is not linear. Like you will bring certain changes in your life and in a day you could see the result. You can fall back and then you have to like pick yourself up and go again and do the efforts. So it's a kind of a spiral thing. It's not a very linear road to bring change in yourself at your personal level or at any level. And then we also focuses on that these self-care techniques and these self-help tips could help you, but it's okay to like take a professional help, and at organizational level how to create support and how to create like professional help for people in this job. So that aspect is the fourth aspect of the book, that's action orientation. It's based on what actions you can take and what actions like organization can take, what actions people can take in terms of changing their perspective and giving them a benefit of doubt to see them from different angle. So the major takeaway is to see their work as their work, like one aspect of their life, not their whole life and whole intention, and to see the whole picture and be informed before making any decision and judgment about them.
Thank you. That was a properly timed applause. Because now, Dr. Carroll and I are going to talk just a little bit about our graduate programs and our disciplines. I'm going to speak a little bit first because Dr. Carroll's going to speak just a little bit more and talk to Shubhangi, of course. I'm going to volley back to Chief Mitchell because she's a graduate of our master's program in criminal justice. But before I do that, just want to give you guys an overview. We have 2 master's degrees in our department. We have a master's in criminal justice, and we have a master's in homeland security. We have a thesis option for the master's in criminal justice. The master's in homeland security students do a capstone project. We have had a lot of students do both master's degrees, and they're both currently offered completely online. However, that has only occurred, I believe, in the past, I think we went fully online maybe 2-3 years ago. So Chief Mitchell, when you were in the program, we had face-to-face classes, right? You want to talk a little bit about being in the master's program and what you got out of it? And it was wonderful, right? It was a great experience.
So one of my taglines when talking about AUM is not just a great place to work, but it's also a great place to get an education, because I'm a recipient of that. And we know in education is what you want out of it, and what you put into it is what you get out of it, right? So if you don't put anything in it, you won't get anything out of it. But in the master's program, my instructors were awesome, and they were face-to-face classes. And they love the face-to-face, and because I'm a face-to-face person, I need to look at you when I'm doing this, right? But it was great. Having an understanding, being able to ask questions, and not just on the day of class. So the instructors are always there if you needed them, but you had to let them know that you needed them. But it's being in class, participating in class, and so being there for a reason, and I think being a little older too, you know, I was dedicated to getting that degree and getting it with a good grade, right? So that was a mission of mine, but I enjoyed being here and being a student. Great opportunity.
Do you remember taking the comprehensive exams?
Yes.
I knew that would elicit a reaction. I think we've all had those
Mhm.
moments, but yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So,
So I was working at the city at the time, and there was this incentive that said they would pay for you to get your degree, and after you got your degree, you got a step raise. So that was an added incentive, but it was a great thing to be able to come here and to be able to do that.
exactly. Yes, thank you for sharing that. And I'll let you
Cool.
talk about psych
Yeah.
programs.
Well, if anything that we've talked about today interested you in any way, and I'll speak personally first. So I offer a course once a year called Psychology and the Law, and we cover topics like deception detection. What are the actual reliable ways of assessing whether somebody's lying to you, not like shifty eyes or kind of fidgeting with their hands? What are actual good predictors? Eyewitness memory and its lack of reliability, interrogation techniques, what leads to false confessions, true confessions, etc. But beyond that, we also offer a master's, and our master's is in clinical psychology. And I don't know if Shubhangi, if you would mind, since you're in it, you're in your second year, figure you have firsthand experience being a student, so maybe sharing with the audience kind of what it's like to be a student in our program and things that maybe relate to what you've learned and how they relate to stuff that you covered in the book.
Yeah, so like in my first year, I like the thing that we have less student in a class, so class is more interactive. We can reach out to our instructor and get a personalized feedback, and that really helped me because as I am doing my internship right now, so I could see in getting the personalized feedback, I could actually work better in my internship, and all the learnings in social psychology, assessment, and everything could help me actually how to go about it. And there are like few students, so it creates more opportunity to be a part of research lab, to learn from our professor, and like everyone is really nice, like they all are here to support me today, so that's a really great thing, like they are there for so that's a great thing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. And so Shubhangi mentions she's doing her internship. So as part of our 2-year master's in clinical psychology, you can either go the internship route where you get practicum hours, or you can go the thesis route. And if you choose the thesis route, that would require a research project, right? So if anybody has interest in conducting their own research, maybe related to some of the topics we talked about today, or maybe something related to some of the other labs that we offer, that's definitely a possibility. And beyond the legal psychology research that I conduct, I do research on interviewing eyewitnesses, some mock jury decision making. But there are other labs that offer some related topics. So for example, Dr. Arms Chavez, she's the chair of the department, and her lab focuses on research related to prejudice, discrimination, and hate. And so really interesting stuff. She teaches a really interesting class on that once a year as well. Other labs do research on health psychology. So if you are interested in mindfulness, you can research that. We have multiple clinical psychology labs. We have some research done on cognitive and behavioral decision making. So if you're making suboptimal decisions, not making the best choices, you can try to understand why you're not making the best choices. Maybe food related choices or procrastinating related choices. But so those are some of the research labs. You can get involved as an undergraduate. You can get involved as a graduate student. You can choose the internship route and still decide to do research on the side, right? You can do internship and thesis both, but there's a lot of opportunities to kind of get involved with this stuff instead of just hearing us talk about it. You can do some of the research yourself, learn about it firsthand, and then be a Shubhangi and keep doing it. But yeah, those are the academic programs that relate to this topic. So I think what we wanted to do at the end was just kind of open it up to questions to the audience, if there are any.
Chris, there you go.
Congratulations, first of all. We all are so proud of you, Shubhangi.
Thank you.
I have this question for you, which in your book talks about self-help. You explained it because it doesn't go for cops only, it is for all of us.
Right.
So if you could explain it a little more well for us, being students here, because it's in different stages, tiring and things like that. I have felt it, so I can say that way. And how do we go about it, except the yoga exercises and things like that, which we generally do, but as a psychologist, what do you suggest us?
So like apart from alternative means, in book I talk in detail about how to understand your emotion. Like it talks about the psychoeducation. So how to understand your emotions better, like how it functions, how to label it, how to understand your thoughts, how to understand your behavior, and how to understand all three of them are linked together. It explains about that. It tells about like how your body reacts to burnout and exhaustion, and when you reach those stages, and how to, like, it's a checklist for cop, but I think as a student also you can tick mark those checklists, because it basically talks about your own resilience, your family, and other aspect that as a student you have all those aspects in your life. So I think that checklist you can also use it to identify which areas you need to work on, and based on that you can pick up those chapters which talk specifically about that area, like in terms of how to manage your work and life better, certain tips and tricks in self-care, like how to go about your everyday routine in self-care. So I think based on that, it could help you out in picking up the chapters of the book that could be helpful for you. So I think in all these aspects, it is applicable for everyone. Yeah.
I just want to point out one thing. So I have seen many movies, like there are many Bollywood movies or Hollywood movies. They always portray policemen as bad people, like they are the villains, and there is a hero which is a civilian and he saves everybody. So everyone think of cops or police officers as negative guys. So what I wanted to say was that your book is really doing a great job, because it will help us understand their perspective, like what they go through in their life, and I think it will also clean up their image. So it's a great thing that you have done. So thank you for that.
Shubhangi, congratulations on your book and the completion. I have a question. Was there anything that surprised you when you completed your book about your research?
Like the way he mentions about social media, we have seen certain movies like making them heroes in social media. We have seen like certain amazing cop shows that make their work very heroic, and that kind of not show the things that they're actually going through, because they make it really heroic. So I have certain chapters when I work on the aspect of social media, and I have worked on Bollywood movies specifically, like how they portray it. So like that's really shocking how social media could impact your perception. So that's one of the things that shocked me, because about all the other things I've seen it like firsthand, like I've seen people dealing with it, so that's not that much shocking. But the way social media could change your whole perspective, that's like really shocking when I was researching on that chapter. Welcome.
Well, we had great discussion, and let's give our panel a big round of applause. Thank you all for coming, and Shubhangi is going to sign the books. There are books available for purchase if you're interested, and we also have refreshments. Please help yourself. Once again, thank you again for coming and joining us this evening.